Well, good evening, everyone. It is exactly 5:30, and I am happy to call to order the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Special Meeting of the Board of Directors. Could we please have a roll call?
Director Edwards,
Present.
Director Riley. Here. Eisenhart,
Present.
Hawk,
Here.
Here.
Vice Chair Henderson,
Here.
Hunt,
Here. Thank you very much. This evening, it is my pleasure to welcome you all. I hope everyone's had a good day and that you're here for a very interesting meeting tonight. I want to just say a couple of words before we begin our presentation. In November of 2018, 56% of the local people who live in the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District service area voted to determine if it would be feasible to purchase our water system from Cal-Am. We voted to determine if our water could become a community-held asset instead of a privately held corporate asset over which we have no control. We are in this discussion together. 85% of the people in California have publicly owned water, not corporately owned water. Tonight, we're going to share with you the price tag for this effort, for this bold step forward to controlling one of our most basic human needs, our water. This step is an investment in our future, and it is up to us. Together, we can change the trajectory of our future control over something we all need to survive, our water. And now I will turn to our county council for a report from our district council with the report. And I should have announced myself. I am Mary Adams, Supervisor Mary Adams. I represent the 5th District of Monterey County, and I'm also chair of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board. Thank you. District Council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening to you, to the members of the board, and most importantly, to the public. I'm to report on the action taken at the March 24th special board meeting. That was a special meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board of Directors. It was held at noon on March 24. All directors participated. The meeting itself was a continued session to allow the board to complete consideration of the agenda item CS1 that had first been convened at an earlier special and regular meeting. That meeting had been held on March 20th, 2023. The board did not have an opportunity to complete its review of that matter. So on March 24th, the sole item before the board at the continued meeting was labeled CS1 Conference with Real Property Negotiators, District Representative David Stolt regarding negotiation affecting properties held by California American Water Company. During that closed session, a single action was taken by roll call vote. Upon the motion of Director Edwards and upon the second of Mayor Oglesby, the board unanimously adopted a motion to authorize General Manager Stolt to tender a purchase offer to California American Water Company effective this date, April 3rd, 2023, to acquire Cal-Am's Monterey water system for an amount not to exceed $448,808,000. The vote on the motion was 7 votes in favor, no votes against. There were no absences, nor were there any abstentions. Madam Chair, that completes my report. I return it to you.
Thank you very much, District Council. And now it is my pleasure to turn to our General Manager, David Stolt, who's going to give us an overview of the appraisal and the offer process. After the completion of the presentation by Mr. Stolt, we will have public comment, both from those in chambers as well as.
Hello.
And we will have a 2-minute limit for each person making comments. So now we will turn to General Manager David Stolt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joel's going to put the presentation up on the screen. And while he's doing that, Joel, keep looking for Bill Stannard. Yeah, thanks. There we go. Well, thank you. I'm going to open with a few more introductions. We have with us today representing our outside eminent domain attorneys. It's the firm of Rutan and Tucker. Mr. Doug Dennington will be joining us and will be available for any questions our board has or any response to public comment. On value and how we can afford it, we're assisted with Raftellus Financial Consultants, who have been with us since the beginning. These are certified, accredited appraisers in addition to superhero financial analysts. And finally, on the can we finance it side, our investment bank is represented by Barclays. They will not be joining in the presentation, but just to have you rest assured that we have an internationally recognized investment banking firm with us. Also, the firm who did the public buyout of the water system in Missoula, Montana. Our chairman has already covered this, but why are we here? Well, we're here because the voters sent us here. This was not a discretionary action of our board sitting around thinking, hey, wouldn't it be nice? It was a fairly overwhelming vote on an initiative that resulted in us being charged with the will of the voters to pursue public ownership. And why would we? Well, the reasons have been talked about a little bit already, but the goal is a lower cost of operations, same or better quality of service, local governance, let you have a voice in what's going on to you and about you, and greater transparency. And as our chair pointed out, the model works. 85% of urban water supplied in California is by public agencies. This is not something we're inventing on our own. And with that, I want to turn to the appraisal process. I know that our general counsel read a number, and I don't know how quick you were with your pens, but we'll let it hang up there for a little bit. $448,808,000. Our financial consultants will tell you how that was derived, but rest assured it's a combination. It's the value of the enterprise as a business. That value is developed through a rigorous known set of standards or policies, and that will be explained to you. And then there are additional other assets that are added to the total to reach that $448.9 billion figure. It was transmitted to California American Water earlier today. They are in receipt of it. It was only the right thing to do to give them a preliminary look, knowing what they're coming into. And that will be followed up with physical copies delivered to CalAm sometime this week, and copies of the appraisal, which will be available on our website beginning tomorrow, as well as copies of this presentation. How did we get here? Well, it's been a long and winding road. Measure J was passed in November of 2018. We put together a team of experts and did the financial feasibility analysis throughout 2019, which was proved to be feasible. And we held a very large public forum. If you remember, some of you were there at the Embassy Suites. We then focused on the environmental impact report, both the notice of intent all the way through the notice of determination. And we were sued over that and ultimately prevailed. So we have a certified EIR. And then we began our application to the Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO, a countywide commission. And there were three things we asked them to rule on. One is the annexation of roughly 58 parcels so that our boundaries and California American's main system boundaries would be the same. We asked to be reviewed in municipal services review, and those two came out just fine. And we thought, while we're there, let's ask LAFCO to activate some latent powers or make clear that our latent powers are activated, even though we, the district has sold water retail since 1994. That did not go as planned, and we're now on a different path, but we have a clear direction on dealing with that issue. That process took practically an entire year, and it took some more when you really think that we slowed down our application process based on comments that we received during the CEQA or EIR process. So we spent about a year and a half preparing and finishing with LAFCO when we expected maybe 6 to 9 months. So that threw us off schedule a little bit, but here we are now with an appraisal. The appraisal was authorized in the middle of last calendar year. We reassembled the team. It takes time, but we finally got there, made the offer today, and you're going to hear about that tonight. But expect delays on that long and winding road. So with that, I want to turn our attention to methodology and findings, and we will be joined by John Mastracchio of Reftelis Financial Consultants, who has a presentation to kind of walk you through how this is done, how it got there, and what it yielded.
Great, thank you, Dave. How's my audio?
Very good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, board members, Mr. Stolt, and members of the public. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll give you a short presentation of a long 300-page document. I appreciate you all can you all see
Yeah,
the slide presentation? I'm sorry?
John, we do see it. Do you not see it?
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm John Mastracchio with Reftelis. I was the lead appraiser that valued the Monterey water system. I was supported by a number of staff members and other professionals here at Reftelis, including Bill Stannard, who I believe is on the webinar as well. So I'll walk through a brief presentation and summary and overview of the appraisal and how we arrived at the opinion of value. So first, objectives and purpose. The objective of our assignment was to provide an opinion of the fair market value of the Monterey water system. And that includes all the assets that comprise the utility system, the water plants, distribution system, storage tanks, pumps, land, water rights, and other components that make up the system. And the purpose, as was mentioned, was to provide an opinion of value that the district could use in making a purchase offer to Cal-Am, or to proceed with condemnation if necessary. Now, the appraisal that we completed was completed in accordance with specific definition of fair market value that was contained within the California Code, and that's reproduced here, shown here. Essentially, we intended to find the highest price that would be agreed to between a willing buyer and a willing seller, where no party was under any obligation or necessity to buy or sell, and when both parties had full knowledge of the system. And our opinion of value represents the complete 100% ownership of the Monterey water system, assuming that the system is going to be used and continue to be used as a functioning domestic water system. So in appraising the system, there were 3 approaches that we considered and utilized. Those are shown here, and they include the income approach, the market approach, and the asset, or sometimes called the cost approach. And these are really standard, industry accepted, commonly used approaches to value utility systems and other similar business enterprises. So I'm just going to touch on each of these, and I'll show you the value indicator that was derived from using these 3 approaches. So first, I'll start with the income approach, and the income approach is a value indicator or an approach to determining a value indicator. And it measures the present value of future economic benefits of owning the system. And by future economic benefits, here we're looking at the future net income and the future net cash flows of the Monterey water system. And this approach is relevant when the water utility enterprise generates positive net income, profits, or positive cash flows. So in applying the income approach, there were some key things that we considered. And first of all, CalAM is regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission and is allowed to earn a rate of return on its asset rate base, which is comprised of the assets and the investments that they've made in the system to provide service to customers. Secondly, CalAM has an ongoing rate case with the commission and is in an application for a rate adjustment that was filed last year, but more recently updated in January this year. And CalAM in that rate filing provided their projections of revenues, expenses, net income for the period from 2023 to 2026 for their central division, which is the larger portion of the division in which the Monterey system is a part of. And so we use CalAM's financial projections as the basis for our income approach value. And then third, CalAM also has a cost of capital rate application, and CalAM in that application proposed a rate of return on their assets of 8%, which is slightly higher than the rate of return that they were previously authorized to earn, which is around 7.1%. And so in evaluating the cost of capital and the rate of return that the system can provide, we did utilize an 8% rate of return, which was similar to what CalAM proposed in its application. And then fourth, the income approach considered the cost of necessary normal recurring capital reinvestments in the system that would be required going forward. And we estimated that at about $8 million or $18 million a year. So given these considerations, we applied those to the income approach and using a method called the discounted cash flow method. And that method resulted in a value indicator of about $316 million for the central division, which we then had to prorate to adjust that value to reflect only the Monterey water system, which excludes the some of the central satellite systems. And when that adjustment's considered, we came to a value indicator of about $301 million under the income approach. We also considered the market approach, and this approach is similar to what you would think about when you buy or sell a home. So if you're in the market to buy or sell a home, you might look to the housing market for similar houses that have sold in your area for an indication of value of the house that you're either considering buying or selling. And appraisers do really the same thing for water utilities under the market approach. And there are really two methods that we look at. One is the guideline transaction method, where we look at sales transactions that have happened in the water sector that are similar or comparable to the Monterey water system. And then another is to look at guideline companies, which are publicly traded companies that are water utility companies. And we look at their value in the market based on the value of their stock or their current stock price. And so in applying this approach to the Monterey water system, we came to an indication of value in the range of $376 million to $391 million, depending upon the specific method that we looked at. We looked at both methods and came to that range of value. And then the last approach that we considered was the asset, or sometimes called the cost approach. And essentially under this approach, we're valuing each component of the system at its replacement or its reproduction cost, and then adjusting for depreciation. And so this is the method that considers each individual value of all the machinery and equipment that's used, the pipes, the pumps, the tanks, the land, the water rights, essentially all the components that comprise the water system. And then that current cost or reproduction cost is then adjusted for depreciation, which considers the condition and the remaining useful life of the assets. This depreciation also considers what's called functional obsolescence and economic obsolescence, which I'll speak to in just a minute here. So under the asset approach, we estimated a reproduction cost less depreciation, which considers the condition of the system. That was valued at $653 million, which is considerably higher than the original cost of the system, less depreciation, which was estimated at $248 million. The reproduction cost less depreciation estimate shown here does not yet consider economic obsolescence. So next, we looked at the market in California to see whether other transactions that have occurred in the past have purchase prices that equaled replacement costs or reproduction costs, new less depreciation. And we examined 11 transactions that have occurred in the past, what their purchase price was and what their estimated RC and LD value estimate was. And we found that 11 out of the 12 transactions that sold were sold for significantly less than the reproduction cost new less depreciation amount. The percentages on the chart at the right are the purchase prices as a percentage of the RC and LD estimate that was prepared. And so this indicates that in many cases, purchase prices of these systems do not equal RC and LD, but rather the transaction value is less than RC and LD, and sometimes that's significantly less. So one reason for this is that the net income, the net cash flow that's generated by these systems don't support paying RC and LD. And if a buyer purchases a system for RC and LD, the water rates that would have to be charged to recoup that investment would be substantially higher. And so this is what, in essence, is what we talk about. When we talk about economic obsolescence, that's generally what we mean. So under the asset approach, we did adjust for economic obsolescence. First, what we did was accumulate all those individual components and what those replacement costs, less depreciation values were without obsolescence. We came up with that approximately $650 million. But then applied an economic obsolescence factor to reflect actual market prices and the fact that the earnings and net cash flow generated by the Monterey water system don't support a value of $650 million. And if someone purchases the system for $650 million, water rates would be significantly higher. So after considering and applying this economic obsolescence factor, we estimated a value of the system under the asset approach indication of value of about $337 million. So here's a summary of each of the value indicators that I just walked through under each of the approaches. And the results, as you can see in the column that says value indicator, are a bit different depending upon what approach we looked at. From there, we considered and we weighted each of the approaches based on a number of factors, and that includes the availability of data and information, the quality of the data and information that we were able to utilize, the suitability of each approach, considering the water utility industry. For the market approach, for example, we looked at the number of transactions and the number of companies that we had available to us, and their relative comparability to the Monterey system and the limitations associated with that comparability. We also used our professional judgment and experience to come up with the weightings. And so as you can see, we gave considerable weighting to the income approach and the asset approaches, and we gave very little weighting actually to the market approach because of the limited comparability of the other sales transactions that we had available to us. So in combining these value indicators and weightings, we came to a value opinion in aggregate of about $320 million. That's that 319,653 number you see on the screen. And this is the value that I call kind of the base value estimate. Because as Mr. Stolt mentioned, we did make some adjustments to that value estimate to inform the district board about other considerations, and I'll talk about those right now. So we identified several additional items that the district may want to consider, or at the time may wanted to consider additions to the base value in making their offer to CalAm. And they come into 4 categories. So first, there's some excess real estate land that is not integral to the water system that could potentially be separated from the water system and sold with having no impact on the ability to provide service. And those parcels were valued at about $4.4 million and were excluded from the base value I just showed you, but we then add them here when we consider all of the asset additions. Secondly, there was about $13 million of construction work in progress that at the time that CalAm submitted their application for their rate case. And this is work on the system that has not been fully completed. There are assets that are not in service yet, but that CalAm has currently invested in. And so that's included in the asset additions as well. Third is accounts receivable and unbilled revenue. That's estimated at about $13.8 million. And then fourth are a category of additions called memorandum and balancing accounts. And those are cost items that CalAm has incurred related to the water system that the Utility Commission has authorized CalAm to track for future recovery over time. And so we added those items as well. And when we add all of those items together, we get a total value estimate with the additions I just mentioned of that 448,810, which is the number that Mr. Stolt had presented as well. So with that concludes my brief summary of the appraisal, and I'll turn things back over to Mr. Stolt for some additional comments.
Thank you very much, John. Terrific job. So there you have it. That's the methodology, that's the amount. But we know that there are going to be obvious areas of disagreement, and we recognize that, coming out of the chute. One of those areas of disagreement, well, let me get the chart up and you can see them all. Oh, there's Bill. All right. And welcome, Bill. I hope you heard John's presentation. It's not advancing, Joel. There we go. Okay, next, please. We are going to enter a place where this would be better than you. So we'll see how we get there. The obvious areas of disagreement include the weighting of the 3 appraisal methods. You saw that Mr. Mastracchio had assigned certain weights that emphasized primarily the income approach, and then secondarily the cost approach, and then a little bit with the market approach. We also recognize that there's an investor-owned utility bias to the reproduction cost new less depreciation, that high number, that $600+ million number. But as was shown, I think very well, that's not what transactions trade for. You don't see that in the marketplace, so a necessary discount need be applied. the valuation of real estate and water rights. You may have noticed on one of his slides that they were included in the reproduction cost new less depreciation, that $600 million figure. But with obsolescence, they're significantly discounted. We know that utilities have said, hey, that piece of property's got a tank on it, or that piece of property's got a clear well on it. It only has value to a special buyer, a buyer who wants to buy the utility, meaning it's part of the enterprise. Water rights, if water rights were saleable and you sold them, you would have an enterprise with no water to sell, and then your income approach would drop to zero. So yes, you can assign value, but there's a countervailing offsetting loss in value if you were to do so. So we think that the approach that we've seen here captures all that. And then we have what I call the California Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC world, versus the real world. As an example, the large Class A utilities, of which Cal-Am is one here in California, they do make a business out of acquiring smaller Class B and Class C mutuals. And it's different than what was defined earlier as fair market value. What you have in these investor-owned utility transactions regulated by the PUC and other states' PUCs, just as an example, American Water Works itself last year closed 26 acquisitions in 7 states for $335 million. They have under agreement 21 acquisitions in 9 states for another $326 million. This is an approach that works very well at expanding their rate base and the level of return to shareholders. But the difference is you have a willing seller who wants to sell for as big a price as possible, as you would in selling your home. But you've got a willing buyer who wants to give you the biggest price that he can possibly give you, because that's then what the investor-owned utility is putting into rate base at the commission, and therefore they're able to earn higher return. It is different than an arm's length transaction between a normal willing buyer and willing seller. So there's that kind of mentality out there that we know we will have to deal with. Should use this one. Yep. They will also tell you that the final price is always more than your appraisal. And history and data shows that to be true. But, and here are transactions, what we call large transactions. There's a number of small transactions out there that we've looked at. And you can see the red line is what the government agency appraised or offered initially at. The blue line is what the investor-owned utility owner said they were worth. And the green bar, which I think here looks more light blue or gray, is what the final value was actually at. And you can see the final values pretty much track closer to the government agency appraisals than they do to the investor-owned utility assessment of their own worth. And so we know that's going to be an issue, and we'll talk about it, and you'll be told that we've underbid because you never get the price that you ask for. And keep in mind that if it goes fully to the valuation process, that's a jury trial where you're in presenting your view of the world and the value of the assets and the obsolescence that's built in, and they're presenting their world, and there's a lot of discovery and back and forth, and it's whatever the jury decides at that point. But generally speaking, they've been closer in value to the initial government appraisal. So how are we going to pay for this thing? I brought back Bob. Some of you may remember Bob from the Coastal Commission hearings. So Bob's back, and Bob says, how the heck can we afford this? And I think it's important that you understand how the payment of this significant $448 million acquisition gets rolled into rates with no impact to you as the ratepayer. Well, actually a positive impact to you. So Bob says, hey, what's in my water bill today? Well, there's operations and maintenance and purchased water, about $42 million. There's depreciation and amortization, in this case, about 11.7. There's regulatory expenses. Living in a world with the Public Utilities Commission and other commissions like Coastal Commission, there's a lot of regulatory baggage that comes with that. There's other taxes like business and license fees and so forth. There's property taxes. There's state income taxes, federal income taxes. There's what was referred to as memorandum and balancing accounts, regulatory assets, revenue streams that have been authorized for recovery by California American that we know they would normally be entitled to in the course of their business and that we need to compensate them for. There's the New Jersey parent. There's the California parent. And then there's the debt and equity return, including profit. All told, that's about $100 million annually that goes into your rates. And while this is just simply an example, it's pretty close to what you're looking at in the rate case that's been filed. So then you ask yourself, or Bob asks on your behalf, what goes away with public ownership? That debt and equity return, profit goes away. The California parent goes away. The New Jersey parent goes away. The memorandum and balancing accounts go away. Income taxes go away. Property taxes go away. Other taxes don't go away. Regulatory expenses, you no longer have to deal with the commission. They go away. And depreciation and amortization. So now that all just disappeared. You're looking at 43 million. But there's going to be new costs, right? We got to pay for this transaction, for example. So here's that 43 million. What new things come to you under public ownership? Well, we do have to invest in capital. I replaced the depreciation and amortization with a similar amount of annual investment in the physical system. These systems require a lot of capital investment. And there's the debt for the acquisition. Grand total of $82,300,000 or annual savings over CalAm ownership of 17.7. And that's with the debt at the offer price for 30 years at a 4.5% interest rate. It's just a conceptual example, but it's really close to the truth. So Bob gets it. Bob's all in. Bob says annual savings of 17%, 18% and paid for within the rates. I'm in. And that's basically what we're telling you is the deal. There's not an additional general obligation tax to pay for it. There's not a known increase in rates. And even if all things were to remain equal and your rates were the same, going forward, there's a lower cost to capital to a public agency. So when you look at the intensive nature of infrastructure investment, what I call capital investment, if you're borrowing in the future at a lower rate, you're going to grow your rates less quickly. So even if we were wrong and it's not 17 million, but it's $500,000 in the first year, what you'll see going forward is a line closer to the dotted line, which is simple inflation, as opposed to the blue line, which is CalAm's increases with a little hit in 2013, which was a drought year and under collection of revenues and so forth. So what you see here is, according to the annual reports filed with the PUC, CalAm was growing on average 17% in revenue for 2019 to 21. And their current rate case, which would carry you forward through 2026, is an average increase of just under 10% per year. Whereas public agencies in the water business have typically grown just over inflation. So think of it as that dotted line under public ownership versus the blue line under private ownership. And over time, how further and further apart they will become. So let's turn our attention a little bit to next steps. I think we're pretty much done talking about value, but where does this go from here? Well, here we are in April. I don't know how we got to April. This year is going by pretty quick. But April 3rd, the offer letter was sent. We have a April 30th due date for a response. We will either have a response or no response, but no response after the 30th is a no. So, we look forward to, and unless they say we're very interested and we'd like a longer response date, which we would certainly entertain. In the rest of April and into May, we will be developing the findings that could support a resolution of public necessity. Our board remains interested in hearing all sides of the equation and learning as they go. They've made no decision yet to condemn the system or hold a hearing of public necessity. But based on the findings that our general counsel, our outside counsel, and staff will present to the board, they can make a decision freely as to whether or not there's enough evidence that it's in the public interest or public necessity to go to the next step. That will be presented to them hopefully in June in a closed session. Again, it's real property negotiation, and it's two-barreled. It's real property negotiation and pending and threatened litigation. So for that reason, there will be more activities in closed session, but there will always be reporting out to you in public session. Then they'll make their decision whether they want to move forward on a hearing of public necessity. And if so, we would try to schedule that probably in late July. And then shortly thereafter, a condemnation action would be filed in Superior Court. So that's what you can come to expect. I think we're there in terms of this presentation. And I can't get this one to move forward anymore either. So hit the next one, please, Joelle. All right. So, Madam Chair, that concludes staff presentation, and we're ready for you to direct public comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stolt. It was an excellent presentation, and thank you, Mr. Mastracchio, as well for giving us that very thorough and in-depth assessment of your appraisal work. Thank you so much for the time you've put into this with us.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to go to public comment. And as I indicated, we will first go to the people who are in the chambers. Every person will have 2 minutes to speak. I did not ask for public comment slips, but we do have a couple of them. And so I will take those people first. We will have Joelle keeping track of us, of our time, with a 2-minute timer that should probably be up on the screen so we can see how we're doing here. And after we complete our public comment, then we will have the opportunity for some staff response if we so choose. So the very first speaker I'm going to call on is Mr. Paul Bruno. If you would come forward. And the next person is Evan Jacobs. So if you can come to the front, Mr. Jacobs, so that we are able to move forward quickly, this would be terrific. Okay, Mr. Bruno.
Oh, good evening, Madam Chair, member of the board. My name is Paul Bruno. I'm a resident of the district and a Cal-Am ratepayer. Thank you for the opportunity to participate. This is an important topic. I'm here to go on the record tonight stating that I believe the district is making a mistake in pursuing the takeover. You all know me. You all know where I stand. But I'm confident I'm going to end up on the right side of history when it's all said and done. The action you take has the potential to bankrupt the district. I went on the record with LAFCO making this exact same point, and I believe they rightfully issued their denial. Tonight, we were treated to a nice PowerPoint presentation, fancy slides, charts, and tables. It's very similar to a town hall presentation made in 2015 for the purchase of the Apple Valley Water Company. Very, very, very similar. The city went through its eminent domain process, the same process that you're probably going to end up going through. Now, fast forward 6 years to 2021. That's when the court handed them this 84-page decision denying the takeover. By this point, the town of Apple Valley had spent over $8 million pursuing the buyout. How much have you spent? The total is already approaching $3 million. How much bigger will it be at the end? Tonight, we heard valuation estimates. They're nowhere near what Cal-Am values its system. it's reasonable to expect the final cost will be significantly higher than these original evaluations. Historically, the valuation variance can range from 175% to 250%. What happens when you plug this variation into your projections? Once what had been appeared to be feasible now could become quickly not feasible. When a takeover effort collapses, the ratepayer is the ones left holding the bag. So the question tonight, how confident are you in your decision? Would you be willing to sign your name and put your home up as collateral to cover the costs if this effort fails? And if not, maybe you should step back and entertain some other second thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. And next we have, I believe it's Evan Jacobs. And others who wish to comment, perhaps if you could sort of stand up and line up over on this side of the room, that would work out pretty well. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Evan Jacobs from California American Water. As you know, the company California American Water has been providing water service on the Monterey Peninsula for many decades. We plan to continue providing water service on the Monterey Peninsula for many decades. More than 100 of my fellow employees live and work here in Monterey. Their job is to provide all of you, whether you agree with us or not, with reliable and dependable service. Please remember to treat them with respect and kindness. Don't take the political squabble out on them, the folks that are out there every day working hard on your behalf. I will tell you that running a water utility is not brain surgery, but it does require special training, licensing, certifications, and experience. In 2021, Monterey County LAFCO commissioners studied thousands of pages of information submitted by the district and submitted by the company. They concluded that the district should not be allowed to become a water provider. Now, the district has filed a lawsuit against Monterey County LAFCO, but the decision stands. Excuse me, it beeped at me at 50 seconds. That decision stands. The lawsuit is ongoing. The district is petitioning for the right to become a water utility, but that appeal has not yet been heard. The district is not legally authorized to move forward with a purchase or the use of eminent domain in this case at this time. In 2019, it was estimated it would cost about $700,000 to complete this process and take about a year. 4 years later, we're here. The district has spent close to $3 million at this point and has not gone back and relooked at the feasibility. As I mentioned to you a couple weeks ago, at some point, I think the district owes it to the voters, owes it to the taxpayers to go back and look at the feasibility of this action and if it makes sense. There are significant risks ahead, significant liabilities that the district may incur if they move forward. So I would encourage you all to take a look, reconsider feasibility, and then let's move forward working on sustainable water supplies to protect the Carmel River. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Yes.
When do I start? Now? Patrick Ferguson, I live in Seaside in a house that my sister owns. Late last year, Orange County Congresswoman Katie Porter did a whole chart and presentation showing that 54% of inflation was caused and exacerbated by corporate America. You had a 30,000% profit from the two top shipping companies in the world. Just for another example, the top two rental car agencies made a profit of 597%. Late last year, the bill went from $90 to $600 inexplicably. I was waiting for a representative from CalAm to show up and give an inspection. What happened? Is there a leak? The doorbell rang and I was there within 20 seconds. He's already around. He left this little thing on the doorknob. He's already around the gate and halfway away from the house. And I'm like, hello. And I tried to engage him like, okay, well, how does the bill go from $90 to $600 in 1 month? And he had no explanation. I go, do you have any suggestions? How do we look? Who should we? And he said, that's the responsibility of the ratepayers. I said, well, what is your responsibility? I said, this is why 60% of Monterey ratepayers and voted to get you out of here. At that point, he ran. There's no accountability from this company. Corporate America.
Thank you for your comments. So I'm going to embark on my standard. Thank you very much. If I could please ask you not to applaud or make any comments, I would appreciate that very much. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Henson. In the early 1980s, I sat up there. And again, in the early 2000s, I was again sitting up there, ultimately as chairman. And all through that time, we've had to deal with Cal-Am, with our local water system. This district was created because Cal-Am was not doing the job. And some of you may remember the horrible drought in 1977. All these decades, Cal-Am has been under the moratorium, not delivering adequate water supplies to this community. So finally, after several attempts, the people said, enough. We need to examine whether it is feasible for us to own this water supply. You just saw this evening why that it is feasible. And I hope that you will go forward and find that there is a public necessity to condemn this company and finally free us from their corporate clutches. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, staff, public. Thank you so much for your intelligent, professional, accurate, feasible, and optimistic plan. I serve as a volunteer, being the chair of the Monterey County Democratic Party. While this is a nonpartisan issue, we did support and endorse Measure J. As it turns out, we were united with the voters in Monterey County who overwhelmingly agreed that this was a good idea. Cal-Am has been a steward of water management, water services in the county of Monterey for a long while. And they remain so, if I understand correctly, in about 15% of the water distribution systems in the United States. Thank you. Thank you for serving the people of this region for those years. Your services are no longer required. The people have spoken. Appreciation goes to Cal-Am for what they have done for us. The people want to manage their own water, and they are capable of doing it. To say they are not is insulting, arrogant, and inaccurate. And we know that any corporation worth its salt would not want to be any of those things. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that grid up there that said April, reject the letter, instead was, we'll say maybe. Let's save the public a lot of money, a lot of time, and let's just move forward with what the people want.
Ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, could you give us your name?
Karen Araujo.
I am Karen Araujo, Araujo.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. My apology for not saying that.
My name is Bruce Anetta, and I want to thank you all for getting this far. It's been difficult. I want to try to talk real quickly about the secondary values that you don't see on that, and I'm going to grab one really big one, and that's pure water, our recycling system. That's this amazing success story. Cal-Am has been fighting it all the way, and Monterey One is all, pushing it forward still as that goes. The one is a recycling program, and that means that you get 2 for 1. You're getting rid of all your wastewater, and at the same time you're providing a very good resource for water. The other one wants to mine. That's why the Cal-Am mining pays you better than recycling. That's why they want to do that. But there's prices to pay for mining. So, but that's where it's at. So the point is, Cal-Am is against the jewel in our crown, and all of ours the feather in your cap for making it happen. Cal-Am is going to fight that, continue to fight that. If nothing else, that's a reason to get them out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Presser. And I got to tell you, we've been working at this since Measure O, which was about 2014. And what a great night this is for celebration. It goes to you, everybody on the board. And Dave, you have done a fantastic job. You have taken the reins of this thing and done what no one has been able to do before, along with this group up here. So you deserve a great amount of applause, whether I'm sorry, but you do anyway. Now, there's one thing that I've been thinking about, and that is that I'm not so sure that Cal-Am wants you to look at their books. But when you do, because if they say that that they don't agree with this and they want to go to court, and let's look at those books and see if there's any connection between all of the people that have been talking pro Cal-Am, and let's see if we can find their names or donations to these people in one way or another. I think that would be a really good side thing to find. And if we do, there might be little Trumps around here. So, you know, I'm not so sure that they're going to want to go to court. I'm not so sure that they want anybody looking at those books, because I want to look at them too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Presser.
Good evening, Michael Bear. I have a question about where does the water supply project, the desal plant, fit into these calculations? Because as you know, it's out at Cemex and nothing's really been built out there. But do you even have the jurisdiction to acquire it? You know, Marina is going to be suing Cal-Am over that, and you're stealing Marina's water. Are you going to be paying for a system that is stealing Marina's water as part of your offer? And so I'm curious if it's in there. So many thoughts that I have, but I do want to echo Dan. It's like, you know, well, a word of advice to Cal-Am, you know, you should take this offer because it's the best you're going to get. And a final word of advice, beware discovery, because that will be excellent. I too wait for that if we get to that point. I am going to take a minute. I don't know if I can get it all done, but I want to talk about the test slant well. Originally, it was supposed to be 1,000 feet long, they said, and they were going to use about 800 feet of it to draw water in. Well, they ended up making it 760 feet long, and I think I know why, but I don't have time to explain it. But of that 760 feet, 150 feet of it, there was a sleeve that goes in to protect it when they put it in, and they couldn't get it out. So they only had 450 feet of intake when they were expecting 850 feet of intake, or about 800 feet of intake. And about 50% of it. And yet amazingly, they said, it's okay, we're still getting 2,100 gallons per minute. Well, how's that possible if you only have 50% of what you planned? And the point is, no one ever asked them how they were counting the water. There's no data tables. Like, Cal-Am just said, yeah, we made it. It's a success. And I just want to have to say, I need an extra 10 seconds. If you guys had made a test slant well that was 50% too short and only had 50% of the intake, and instead of costing 4 million and cost 26 million, as they currently say, we would all call that a failure. Cal-Am calls it a success.
Thank you, Mr.
We
Chair.
need to take this.
Hi there. My name is Kate Daniels, and I'm speaking today as a ratepayer, not on behalf of anyone that I may work for. And I will start by saying I wish that the previous speaker didn't get into the desal plant and that project, and we could just really focus on what's before us tonight, because I do believe that the Monterey Peninsula needs to work very hard to get a long-term, reliable, sustainable water supply. But it also has to be a water supply that's affordable. And I would say to Cal-Am, who spoke earlier, that yes, there are significant risks moving forward, but if you haven't learned yet about this community, this is a group of voters, ratepayers, constituents that are willing to take the risk to move forward. We are people who are willing to take the risk to no longer have the CPUC in our lives. We are people who are willing to take the risk to no longer have ratepayer returns on investments embedded in the rates that we pay Cal-Am every month. We're willing to take the risk to no longer have returns to shareholders in our rates that we pay every month. We're willing to take the risk for a future where oversight of this utility is through an elected board of directors that is accountable to the public. We're willing to take the risk to have local control over our water supply. So I really commend you for where we're at tonight. This is a cause for celebration. And I just implore everyone to let this process move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels.
Hi, Susan Schiavone, Seaside. I just want to say a big thank you to the district for all the hard work you've done to get to this point. And I don't believe one bit that this will bankrupt the district. I know how fiscally responsible you are. I know how careful and conservative you are in using the money of the public. And I have no doubts that you will prevail. And I just want to say thank you again, and also say that in terms of LAFCO, we know that was an incorrect decision. Votes were made based on certain district favors versus the good of the whole. We know that you will prevail there as well. And I am very proud of you, and I want you to go forward with this. And I know everyone here does as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cavoni.
My name is Sylvia Shi. I live in Seaside. I am so happy that we are going forward because two things. If we ratepayers can afford Cal-Am, we certainly can afford buying it out. And second thing is that a lot of people come thinking that people working for Cal-Am will lose their job. That is not true. We will hire people. We couldn't run the empty ship. So there really is no impact. And thank you for taking us all these years.
Thank you, Ms. Shi.
Anna Thompson, Carmel. Thank you, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, for your leadership and hard work in getting to where we are now. Many thanks also to Public Water Now, Monterey One Water, and the many individuals who have given their time and efforts in making this possible. Cal-Am has stated that the water district has no experience in operating a water delivery system. The requirements for an efficient, well-run water system are well documented. All fundamentals of the technology are well proven. The key is to select the right personnel for the work to be performed and to implement the necessary quality assurance and quality control programs to ensure both a safe and effective system. Most likely the same employees that Cal-Am has, they will be doing the same work. And I'm pretty certain. Maximizing profits should not be part of the quality assurance program. Drinking water is a public resource that should be managed by public agencies, not private companies. Cal-Am's profit motivation is at odds with the public goods. I look forward to a new era when our water delivery systems are community-owned and managed by public agencies accountable to the people serves. And we have a wonderful agency here. Thank you so much for all your work. Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
Melody Crislock, Public Water Now. Thank you, MPWMD, for your rigorous and thorough work in support of Measure J, and for remaining undaunted in the face of CalAM's threats and fear tactics. The $2.5 million you've spent in preparation to carry out the will of the voters is probably the best investment ever made when you consider the hundreds of millions CalAM continues to add to our water costs. Here's a reality check. Since Measure J in 2018, CalAM has added $26 million to the cost of our water. The recent stalling on the Pure Water Monitor expansion has cost us another $14 million. They've wasted $154 million on a desal plant we don't need and $40 million on their last failed desal project. And then there's the $64 million in RAM charges for the water we didn't use. Why would anyone question the $2.5 million that MPWMD has spent in preparing a strong case for the buyout? Public Water Now put Measure J on the ballot in the interest of every member of this community. We should not have to pay for the most expensive water in California just to benefit CalAM shareholders. CalAM claims water would cost more under MPWMD ownership. Not true. Public Water Now realized long ago that CalAM's guaranteed profit and its inefficiencies could be used to fund a buyout and reduce the cost of our water, as has been demonstrated tonight. A heartfelt thank you to all the Public Water Now volunteers whose tireless effort made Measure J possible. It's truly a historic moment when a community can stand up to corporate power and win.
Thank you, Ms. Crislock.
Good evening. I am Jan Schreiner. I'm speaking as a ratepayer this evening. Not of CalAM, I should say, of Marina Coast Water District. I'm from Marina, but I'm speaking as a resident rather than as the president of the board for the water district because we have not taken any action on this item ourselves. So I just want to point out that we find in Marina that many times this public resource is so important to control by the public. And we've had a great outcome with water, M1 Water and Water Management District of Monterey Peninsula on the project that already exists, the Pure Water Monterey. And we're so excited to have national recognition for the engineering on that. And the collaborative piece has continued. At the same time, this last year, we arranged for mutual aid agreements. We started with 3 organizations, Castroville Community Services District, Seaside Municipal Water Services, and CalAM. We have been successful in establishing good neighbor mutual aid agreements with the 2 public agencies. We are still waiting for CalAM. So it doesn't hurt Marina to buy them out. We really appreciate all the work that you're doing in that regard. I totally agree with Ms. Thompson, who spoke earlier. Public resources need to be in control by the public, not by the private. So thank you. I know it's going to be a lot of work. Going to hear a lot of things that are not very flattering, but we are all in this together and we will continue on the way the voters have requested because this is what democracy looks like.
Thank you so much, Ms. Schreiner.
My name is Anita Dyer, and I want to thank all the staff and the board members for their hard work in bringing us this far along. I'm very much looking forward to the day when we have put the public back into public water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dyer. Is there anyone else in chambers that wishes to speak tonight on this subject? Yes.
As a CalAM customer and Monterey resident, God bless you all. Thank you so much for all your hard work. A definite celebration that we should be very proud of, but as other people have said, democracy working, you know, it's great that it's happening. You are our representative and just thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jennings. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you all who are present. And now I will go to our clerk and ask Mr. Pablo if we have any people who are online who wish to speak.
Yes, we have 6 raised, well, and the number is climbing. So let me go ahead and call on the first speaker here. Esther Malkin, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Good evening, everybody. Esther Malkin, ratepayer as a renter. And I want to echo the comments that were made by all of the previous speakers, besides the lonely 2 that spoke pro Cal-Am so far this evening. I want to point out that corporate America has been profiting by basic human needs that we require as a community for all. And this has been going on for decades, whether it's housing or utilities. And they have no interest invested in our communities, and they should not be able to profit off of basic human needs the way they have been. Hopefully, this particular case becomes a shining success for us to continue on this path and get rid of PG&E as well. These companies have no business profiting off of the needs of our residents. And I'll just save the time so that others can speak, but my thanks as well to the board and to Dave for putting together a very understandable, easy to relate to presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Malkin. Our next speaker.
Next up, we have John McPherson. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Good evening, and thank you for taking public comment, and thank you for the thorough presentation by staff. I've been a ratepayer in this community for 30 years, and I have 2 questions that weren't really addressed tonight. Number 1 is, what prevents this from becoming a very long and very expensive legal battle? And number 2, what are the guarantees that this will eventually be successful? We talked a lot about what should happen, but we need to really understand what is actually going to happen and what the prospects are for success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. Next speaker.
Jim, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Jim
Clark.
Jim Clark. Are you out there, Mr. Clark?
Chair Adams, we'll just move on to the next speaker, and then we'll return back to Jim
Fine.
Clark.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
John Tilley. John, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you, Joelle. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
My name's John Tilley. I sit on the Ordinance 152 Citizens Oversight Panel of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. I watch water very carefully. I know how to read financial statements. My interest is that we have a sufficient and sustainable water supply for our community. When Public Water Now first rolled out Measure J, it was framed as being just simply a feasibility study that wouldn't cost the district anything. I've urged people to go to the YouTube presentations that occurred at MIS and go to the ones that occurred at the Unitarian Church and see if they line up with how this is being handled now. In February 28, 2022, LAFCO told you no, they didn't feel like it was appropriate for you to move forward with the attempted takeover. As a public agency, you have a duty to fully inform the public of the potential consequences of your choices. The overlap of Public Water Now and the Water District are undeniable, but you are held to a much higher standard as a public agency. As a result of your responsibility, I request this district analyze the potential financial damage a failed attempt to take over CalAm could produce and share the results of this analysis with the public. If you valued the democratic process, you will fully inform the voters. This type of a discussion has not occurred tonight. It's really been more of a rosy scenario. It's your responsibility to inform the voting public of the risk associated with your actions so they can make informed decisions. At the 152 panel, the potential cost has been given as $30 million. Can this risk be absorbed by the district? The cost of this, I would say not. Please reconsider how you present this to the public. Please do incorporate fully the downside risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. Next speaker.
Yes, going back to Jim Clark. Jim, I'm going to ask you to unmute and you may present your comment. And Jim, if you're having trouble with your Zoom connection, please try to call in to make your public comment, and then I'll be right with you. So next up, we have S. Folsom. S. Folsom, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Hi, I would just like to really thank the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District for doing all this work to make sure that this perfectly feasible buyout can proceed. I'm a low-income ratepayer. I think it's pretty ironic that the last caller said that it's the duty of Monterey Peninsula Water Management District to accurately inform the public about costs, high costs. We're getting reamed right now by CalAm. We just had our rates raised by 11%. We pay some of the highest water costs in the nation. There is no way to go from here but up if we stay with CalAm. So is this feasible? We cannot allow CalAm to continue. That is unfeasible. Pretty ironic wording from a company that has spent over $200 million on a failed desal test slant wells and all kinds of public gobbledygook that's been thrown at all of the ratepayers. We need this buyout. It's going to proceed. We will go to court and we will win. Thank you, MPWMD. Thank you for fighting for us.
Thank you, Ms. Folsom.
Moving right along, we have Peter K. Peter, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, I'm Peter Kaiser, and just a minute, get rid of the cell phone. And I was in another meeting, so I only caught the last part of the presentation, but I think we need to be very careful. If it was going to cost maybe $700,000 to prepare this report, and it's costing maybe $3 or $4 million, and I'm not sure if you really realized in your presentation near the end, you're expecting the offer possibly to be denied, and you're expecting to take it to court. You're expecting to have condemnation. You're expecting to have eminent domain. And this is supposed to be not a, some kind of a Soviet type system. You need to be able to be making a reasonable offer to a corporation and convince them that the buyout is in the interests of the public. And you shouldn't be expecting to spend several more millions of dollars to take it to court and to force them to sell against their interest and against their stockholders and against the people who are against this. So The Measure J was improperly written. It should have been in two parts. One, to estimate the feasibility and the cost of a buyout. The second part should have been, does the public want to pay the huge cost to the buyout? And I've even talked to two of your directors there on a regular basis and asked them to not have this eminent domain. And they basically are not interested in representing us, who are not interested in eminent domain enforcing this expensive legal cost. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Kaiser. Next speaker.
Next up, we have the number ending in 312. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to unmute yourself, and you may identify yourself for the clerk's record.
Oh, good evening. Can you hear me, Joel?
Yes.
Margaret Ann Coppernoll speaking from Marina. Tonight, we rejoice as the buyout begins, a spectacular accomplishment. Congratulations, Public Water Now and Measure J voters. Bravissimo, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. This public action represents not only a victory over corporate water tyranny, but an even bigger victory. Constitutional core values and justice victorious over financial greed and citizen economic failure. Water freedom and truth victorious over water supply obstruction and untrustworthiness. We, the people, have immense gratitude and are very proud of you for a job exceedingly well done. My prayer is, may the bells of liberty ring out loud and clear in honor of this historical water hard-won magnificent success. May God bless you with favor now and going forward. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Coppernoll. Next speaker.
Yes, next up, we have Jack Angel. Jack, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Yes, thank you. I think I didn't get in on the initial presentation, but what I've heard so far is totally erroneous. I think that public ownership is going to be much more expensive. I think the way to reduce our water rates is to produce more water. And I think Cal-Am is in the best position with the desal plant that we have to have. The recycling of water and the injection wells are not alone enough going to solve our water problems. So we need to get behind Cal-Am and understand that a private system is a lot less expensive than public ownership. A public ownership is never inexpensive. It's inefficient. It's just not the best solution. So I would encourage the board to consider the cost of litigation in the years of spending millions of dollars trying to take over Cal-Am is ridiculous. And I would encourage us to get behind Cal-Am's system and allow them to produce more water, because their fixed costs go down or spread over more supply if we are able to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. And our next speaker.
Next up, we have Rick. Rick, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Hi. I think how this is going to work is just going to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has already ruled against an eminent domain takeover recently. It's going to cost a whole bunch of money to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and we're ultimately going to fail. I don't see that it's going to happen. That you don't just take over companies and say, "Oh, we're going to take over your company." Cal-Am is not selling. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're not selling. So when it goes through to the Supreme Court, I already know that the Supreme Court's going to rule against us. So who's going to pay all the money? They didn't even include in the cost today that all the cost of maintaining the system and paying all the employees. I didn't see that in there. I mean, all these little Cal-Am, all the Cal-Am employees that are running around have to get paid. Someone has to maintain the system. I didn't even see that cost in there. And to spread it over a really long period of time is just foolish. I mean, to create more water, that's what we need to do. Our recent rains have helped us in that. And I don't think this is even necessary anymore. And I think ultimately we're going to lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next caller, next comment.
Next up, we have Adam Pentritz. Adam, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Good evening, Adam Pentritz. I'm the Government and Community Affairs Director for the Monterey County Association of Realtors. And I'm just going to agree with some of the past comments here, some of the several multiple speakers who have expressed some concerns. When you buy a home, for example, you don't assume the best case scenario. You don't assume that you're going to get the best price or that there's not going to be any issues. It's prudent and wise to assume that you're going to need inspections. If there's something that is problematic, you're going to need to pay to remediate or fix any issues. There's closing costs. You're going to need to be prepared to pay property taxes. So it's prudent to assume, the highest potential costs involved in any transaction, right? What you don't want is to come up short or to realize that you need to come up with more money in a pinch. And the same applies here, except at a much grander scale. People talk about affordability and the ratepayers' concerns. Part of our concern is that there isn't enough water for housing, and the lack of water for housing has contributed to the housing affordability crisis in the Monterey region. So really, we need to look at these costs and be realistic about the fact, right? It's pretty well recognized at this point that CalAm's valuation and assessment of what their assets here are worth is higher than what's been presented, and so we shouldn't just be assuming that this is all going to go smoothly, because candidly, it's not. So I would urge you all to take that into consideration as you do move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Pinterest. Next speaker.
Next up, we have Janet Wilson. Janet, when you're ready, please present your comment. Janet? We'll return back to Janet Wilson in just a minute.
Next speaker.
Next up, we have the number ending in 368. And you may identify yourself for the clerk's record. And you'll need to push *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jim Clark,
Hear you.
and I'm finally in on the phone. So thank you so much for the guy that's doing all this background stuff, for encouraging me to find a phone number and call in. I appreciate it. Good work on your part. Something that I have watched, and just so you all know, I am not beating the CalAm drum, but what I am saying is what you're presenting as the alternative is not a very good solution. And here's why I think that. All of the calculations that of the water that we quote need, that Dave keeps touting over all these years, is based on 10 years of drought, where we have all conserved during that time. We haven't been using all the water we need, we have been conserving. So I don't understand why we're being asked to believe that all the water we need can be produced by this other company called Public Water Now and the recycling plant. That's number one. Number two, in the presentation where, quote, Bob went all in, the presenter forgot to include one not so minor cost, the dollar for employees. Now, for those of you that have never been in business and have only been employees, let me tell you that as a business owner, as a private company, I pay a certain wage. I give 2 weeks of paid vacation. I allow the employees to have a 401k plan, and they get 10, maybe 12 of the public holidays off. Now, you're presenting that this should now become a government agency. Now stop and think about all the people you know that work for the government. They get 3 or 4 weeks worth of vacation. They get 14 to 16 of the public holidays off. And guess what? Once they have been there so many years and they retire, they get their same salary for the rest of their lives. when you retire or when you leave a publicly owned company, you have what you have saved up and maybe the contributions to your 401k. Which
Jim,
do
your
you
time is
think?
up.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Clark. Okay.
Next
so-
up, we have Janet Wilson. Janet, when you're ready, please present your comment. And I'm gonna ask you to unmute. And then just as a reminder
Okay,
to
I
all
think
our Zoom participants.
I
uh,
think you can hear me now.
Yes, we could hear you now.
It's Janet Wilson, homeowner in Pacific Grove. And my comment is, we need to realize that our water rates are the highest, some of the highest in the country. People keep talking about we should get behind Cal-Am. I think they're right. I think we should get behind them and boot them out. Power to the people. Right on.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And now we'll have our next speaker.
Next up, we have Carolyn B. Carolyn, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. I am very grateful for the persistence and study and care that has gone into all of these decisions. I have been very interested to see how people go on either side of the issue. I am grateful that our government is listening to the voters who chose to have public ownership of our water system and is working hard to find ways to make that work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Blooming. The next speaker.
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board. Actually, I'll take that back. I have one more raised hand. Anne, when you're ready, please present your comment.
Thank you. I thought I had kept my hand up. Sorry. I'm Ann Wheelis. I've been a Cal-Am ratepayer since September of 1971. Unfortunately, I don't have bills going back that far, though through raising 2 children with home laundered cloth diapers all the way through their teenage showering time, we have managed to maintain the requirements for drought-resistant water usage. In March of 2014, my husband and I paid $24.25 for water for the 2 of us in our home in Pacific Grove with a drought-resistant yard. In March of this year, 2023, I will pay $38.75 for an average use of 4 gallons a day in a partially vacant home. It is time for us to disengage from Cal-Am, which is a for-profit company, and from their shareholders who added a considerable amount to my bills, and to go for public ownership. Thank you, board members of the Water Board and the staff for the presentation today and for all your hard work for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne.
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you very much. So I think we have heard from our public, both in chambers and as well online. So we will close public comment and bring it back now. I will turn back to our general manager and see if he wants to make any comments on any of the questions that were put forward or comments from this evening.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, public, for your opinions, pro, con, or otherwise. I want to release our consultants for the evening. I appreciate their patience. Mr. Dennington, Mr. Stannard, and Mr. Mastracchio, you don't have to stick around. There are only 2 to 3 mentions that merit a response. There was one questioner who said, where does the water supply project fit in Mr. Mastracchio's presentation, which will be available online on our website tomorrow. There was mention of additions for construction work in progress, specifically excluding the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project costs to date. The theory is you can only appraise and offer on assets that are real. But you can offer for CWIP, construction work in progress, but that has been excluded. Mr. McPherson and Mr. Tilley both made some points about future costs, the prospects for success, and affording a protracted legal battle. Those are issues that have been answered previously and will likely be answered in the future, but not really relevant to tonight's proceeding. And then finally, there were two questioners about, I didn't see the cost of employees, and what was probably lost in the mix is that's what the O&M for operations and maintenance stands for. All the people who do the work are included in O&M. There was a $42 million figure that was reflected in those charts. So obviously we've included all the costs of operations in those. And again, these presentations will be available on the district's website sometime tomorrow. Thank you for the evening. And if you have any specific questions, we are both here to answer.
Thank you. And what I thought I might do is just see if any of our board members, our board of directors would like to make any comments at this time. I'm looking at you, kid.
No, before I go, what do you expect us to do after our comments? You want comments before?
We're just at about time to adjourn the meeting, and I thought perhaps the board of directors may want to make just some comments in general about the evening, or about the tie that Mr. Laredo is wearing, or just about anything that anybody feels like they want to make a comment on.
I'll go after someone else.
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Mr. Riley, do you want to make any comments? No one has to make comments.
No, I just want to comment that it's been a long time to get here. It's almost been 5 years. And I assume we're going to look forward to litigation. It'll take some number of years ahead. So we're just at the first stage of the formal process right now. And that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I'd just like to clarify one thing. When Dave Stolt, the general manager, was answering a question that came from the public about whether the cost of the desal project were included in the appraisal. And in his answer, he talked about the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. He was answering the question. I say this because not everyone here may know that that's the desal project is sometimes called the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, same thing. So the non-existent plant is not included in the appraisal. But some of the costs that CalAm has incurred could be in dispute at some point.
Thank you for clarifying that. I thought it as well. Mr. Eisenhart, do you want to make any comments?
Yes, briefly, thank you. I too, General Manager Stolt, paid careful attention to a few comments. I think it was Mr. McPherson and also Mr. Tilley about risks. In particular, I notes from what they had to say was, what guarantees are there? It's going to be an expensive legal battle. And how much would a failed attempt cost? And we're all working through this process up here, and this is a process still. We've made an offer. Let's see what happens. But what I would also add to all of those risks is one of the things that I know I'm thinking about is what's the cost? And and I'm not here to give an answer, but I look at this. What's the cost of not trying? What is the cost of not trying? I want to think about that as we continue to deliberate. There are costs and there are risks. Many of you don't know me, I'm a litigator. Somebody wins and somebody loses most of the time, unless you settle. We hope for settle, right? We've made an offer. Let's see what happens. And if that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenhart. Are you good?
Yes, I just a couple more comments. Just want to re-emphasize for all the members of the public that the board is continually looking at all the risks and considering all of the risks very, very carefully. So you should know that we're not disregarding any of the risks involved. We're just trying to navigate a path forward to see if what the voters asked us to do can be done in a way that benefits the public. And I just want, last thing I would like to say is just to thank all the members of the public who are engaged, and you make the difference. You, if this succeeds, it will be because of you first and foremost. So thank you for being engaged.
Thank you, Ms. Paul. Ms. Anderson?
Yes, thank you. I want to say that it's been a very interesting process to work on this. For me, I've been here for 2.5 years, and I feel very strongly about the right to vote and about following the voters' request. As Mr. Stoltz said, this wasn't dreamed up by the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. This is a request from the public, not something that you just drop. It was a legitimate, great election. So that's what we're doing, and we're working hard at it. Besides the other things that we're operating, the business of the day. So I'm happy to be with this group of very conscientious people who definitely look at the details. So you can't know ahead of time. You just have to walk one step at a time. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank staff and our consultants for the good work they done on this. It's been a while. We've been working at this one for about 5 years. Some of this work been done twice, believe it or not. I hear Cal-Am talking about 2.5 million. It could be 2.6. It could be 2.7. But we got it done. This phase we got done. So don't worry about the cost. We're going to be as transparent as possible. It's one thing that we have learned, and one thing I have learned, when you're negotiating, and I'm not saying negotiating or sending off an offer in your cities, that's all behind closed doors until it's complete. And when they finish it, they come out and tell you, we brought this, we brought that, or we didn't buy it. So this district is trying to be as transparent as we can. We made an offer, and now you know what that offer was. Yes, sticker shock. I had it. Yes, I had it. But I got a good mayor up here that said, Alvin, is like buying a house. You got sticker shock when you brought your house. Yes, I did. That was my first one. But, it was there. So we're going to move on. We're going to continue to push. We're going to keep you informed as much as possible. We're going to keep that transparency out there. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank those on Zoom for listening to us. And once again, I want to thank all our staff, Dave, and Joel, and our consultants. They did the same thing when they did feasibility. You heard the same thing. So we're going to keep you informed as much as possible. And thank you for coming out tonight and being on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Mayor, do you feel like a comment now?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I was in due bounds with the rest of the board, me being new. I do want to thank staff for the wonderful work they did to put it together, to include the consultants and the board prior to me getting here for getting us to the spot. I do think we're operating underneath the clear direction of the voters. Someone in the public comment said, hey, you're not representing the people that are against this. Well, the majority said they're for it, right? So we represent the whole. And so I say it that way where since this passed, we've heard a lot of comments about how it won't work, how it's too expensive, why you shouldn't do it. But I haven't heard anyone that voted for it say, now I'm against it, if that makes sense. So they understand the risks involved. So I'm not going to say there are risks involved, because I heard it from another person out here, the public, right? And I went to, is it really a risk, or are we trying to invest in ourselves? It's an investment in ourselves. The risk is not trying to go forward and see. It's similar to jumping out of a burning building on the second story. Is the risk breaking the leg? So that's me, right? Do we stay with Cal-Am until when? So it may cost some money, right? It may cost some money, and I don't assume that is a risk. The public asks us to look into it, win or lose, that'll be their answer. And so that's where I want to come down at. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for your comments, Mr. Mayor. And just before we adjourn, I too want to really offer my thanks to staff, particularly. I mean, what you've done, Dave, is just really yeoman's work. I thank you so much for everything that you have put into this, just personally, professionally, and every other way. Thank you very much, Mr. Council, as always. But particularly, I really want to thank the folks who are here tonight and the voters. I thank you primarily because you put your trust in us. You put your trust in us to do the right thing. You put your trust in us to implement the will and the desire that you made when back in November of 2018, you voted to check to see whether we could possibly come up to purchase the water district. And as my final remarks after everything that everyone has said, I just think we can't afford not to do it. So with that, I thank you all so much. And I'm going to adjourn this meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District at let's see what Steve Jobs says, 7:17 p.m. Thank you so very much.